Mr. Lavrov, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us. Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between the U.S. and Russia. What do you see as the greatest challenges to that relationship currently?
Well, I don't see any challenges which are not insurmountable. I believe that after some pause and some irritators which appeared rather artificial in our relationship some time ago, both presidents are keen to move forward, and that was the message President Obama sent to President Putin earlier this year, and the President of the Russian Federation reciprocated in the same vein. We are prepared to go as far as the United States is, of course on the basis of mutual interests, searching for a balance between the interests of the two countries, and on the basis of equality and respect to each other's positions. Within these parameters, anything is possible, and the two presidents pay special attention, which they agreed to do actually 1 year ago in Los Cabos, to improve radically the economic part of our cooperation. There are conditions for this. There is interest on both sides, American business, the Russian business. We need much more investments, and the two presidents agreed, and I think this should be materialized soon, to establish some kind of flexible, informal mechanism to monitor the conditions for doing business in Russia and in the United States, because our businesses encounter sometimes the treatment which we don't believe is really conducive to promoting mutually beneficial economic cooperation. The high-tech area is certainly something which we want to deepen. The outer space is a case in point. Now that last year we managed to enter into force the agreement on the 123 agreement, which is about peaceful uses of nuclear energy, this opens up the prospects for respective companies to cooperate with each other, including on the markets of third countries. Humanitarian area is very important to promote mutual trust and people-to-people contacts. Last year we marked the 20th anniversary of the first Russian settlement in California, Fort Ross. There are now plans to use this premise to establish a permanent Russian-American Center of Cultural Heritage. And we also signed and ratified an agreement to facilitate the visa regime for tourists and businessmen. And President Putin suggested to consider doing away with visas altogether for short-term travel of our citizens, and this was again reiterated during his last contact with President Obama. So I think, of course, without closing eyes on what still irritates our relations, missile defense is a case in point, some absolutely, I would say, unprecedented arrogant steps like the Magnitsky Law, whereby the Congress took upon itself to be the judge of the Russian system, basically. This doesn't help at all, and we would have to reiterate this is the rule of the politics and diplomacy in international arena, but all this taken into account, the two presidents are keen to build upon the positive foundation which we have managed to establish.
It's no secret that Russia and the U.S. do not see eye to eye on the conflict in Syria. Has that put a strain on the relationship?
I thought we saw eye to eye when John Kerry was here. I don't think we have any difference in the strategic approach to the situation in Syria or to a situation in any other country. We want all countries to be stable, prosperous, democratic, with the systems which reflect modern requirements of international law, but also reflect the traditions of the society, so that we promote cultural plurality in the world. So we don't, I think, differ on the goals of what all of us want to achieve in helping the people in any country to realize their dreams, if you wish.
But the U.S. government has repeatedly spoken out against what it perceives as being Russia's support of the Assad regime.
Well, that's misperception, and misperceptions are used in today's diplomacy to build the public opinion the right way for those who want to achieve some geopolitical goals.
How is that a misperception?
Russia repeatedly stated that we do not support anyone in Syria. We are not wedded to any personalities. President Assad was best friends of the French, the British, and other European capitals. And that's a fact of life.
But you've supplied them with weapons?
We supply weapons to all those who contracted legally, and this is the universal rule.
Even if those weapons may be used to perpetrate war crimes?
I don't think you can perpetrate war crimes with defensive weapons, with air defense systems. I hope you also know about the volume and kind of weaponry
I have a list.
sold by the United States to the countries of the region. And in quite a number of cases, those equipment, those weaponry include things which you can use against popular demonstrators.
May I just read you a few elements from this list?
Sure.
This is a request from a Syrian army general to a Russian arms supplier from March of this year. 20,000 AK-47s, 200,000 mortar rounds, grenade launchers, millions of rounds of ammunition. These are not defensive weapons.
Are we discussing Syrian army requests or the substance of the contracts which we honor? I think those are two different things, and you have to make a difference.
Were these weapons supplied to the Syrian army?
I have not seen this request, and this is not a contract to which we are committed. Those are two very different things. And as I said, the international law does not prohibit legal supplies, legitimate supply of arms to any sovereign state without violating any international norms. And actually, if you take a look at the existing international legal basis, recently a conference concluded, which was initiated years ago by Britain and some other Western countries, to negotiate an international treaty on arms trade. And we have been very disappointed that the eventual text does not contain very firm language on making sure that arms do not get into the hands of those who were not authorized by the state, in other words, to non-state actors. There is also, but this treaty clearly says that you can only sell arms to the international players like countries, governments, and you cannot sell arms to non-state actors. While this treaty was negotiated, the arms will continue to flow into the region, including into Syria, through hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of the uncontrolled borders. And people who fight the Syrian army, they are very well armed. The situation in the city of Qusair was created by the fact that both sides were fighting with heavy weaponry. The opposition used artillery, used air defense system, and this is a tragedy. What must be done, and that's where the US and Russia see eye to eye, is to do everything to stop it. You know that alongside with the opposition, which is called Free Syrian Army, terrorist organizations fight, and one of them was declared a terrorist organization by the United States, Jabhat al-Nusra, and immediately the political leaders of the opposition said it was a mistake and betrayal, because Jabhat al-Nusra cannot be listed as terrorist organization as long as it fights the regime. I don't even need, I think, to qualify this kind of attitude to what is going on. So when John Kerry was in Moscow on the 7th of May, we were absolutely united that we all must concentrate on bringing the parties to a negotiating table and to implement during those negotiations what was agreed in Geneva on the 30th of June last year.
The peace conference that was slated for June now looks like it will take place in July. Why the delay?
I don't know. You have to interview John Kerry and his officials, because we promised to make sure that the government participates in the conference, and the government said so.
So it's the opposition who are lagging.
That's, I believe, all over the media, and the American officials recognize that the national coalition on which some outside sponsors want to put all the money is not ready not even to negotiate, but to decide who is in charge in this coalition. And this is very unfortunate because there are groups, constructive groups, including those who never left Syria and spent all these years together with the Syrian people, who are in harsh opposition to the Assad regime, and who want to participate in this conference, and who, unlike the coalition, have a constructive agenda. They have their vision as to what kind of Syria they would like to see. When I met with the former chief of the coalition, Muaz Khatib, in February in Munich, in the margins of the security conference, I liked the guy. I think he's a patriot, and I think he's a very responsible politician. And I suggested that instead of trying to get united only around regime change slogan, they should also present some positive agenda for their country.
And you've been successful in that endeavor.
I don't think so. I never saw anything coming from the coalition which would say this is the Syria which we would like to build, with all ethnic minorities, with all religious groups, feeling comfortable, with all citizens being equal, and so on and so forth. This never came from the coalition, which is busy, as I said, by trying to decide who is in charge. And we certainly believe that all spectrum, the entire spectrum of the Syrian society must be present. The Supreme Kurdish Council of Syria absolutely insists that they must be there, and I believe that it is in the interest of all of us to make sure that this is the case, because we want Syria to stay united, one piece, sovereign, territorial integrity respected, and for this you need to have Kurds, among others, at the negotiating table.
Do you believe that President Assad should step down?
This is not for me to decide. This is for the Syrian people to decide.
Do you believe his regime has perpetrated war crimes?
I believe that there are signs that war crimes have been perpetrated by so many people in Syria, and that this must be investigated. This is what we agreed in Geneva on the 30th of June last year. But we have to understand our priorities. If our priority is to punish people, then of course you can say that unless President Assad steps down, unless International Criminal Court considers this case, we would not be ready for negotiations. That's what the coalition and some other opposition figures are saying. But then revenge and punishment is their priority number one. Our priority is to stop violence and to save more lives. And for this, you have to put everything else on the back burner. Everything can wait. The immediate task is to make sure that they sit down and start negotiations. So the government said they are ready. They said that they have a delegation. The foreign minister would be the head of the delegation. We believe that the opposition must do the same as soon as possible, and those who sponsor the opposition must make all efforts to use their influence for good purposes, not, because sometimes we hear statements like, actually some White House representative said the other day that the US would continue to support the political and armed opposition because what is needed is to restore the military balance on the ground. If this is the logic of moving things forward, then I am not very optimistic.
I've spent quite a bit of time on the ground inside rebel-held parts of Syria, and I've seen fighter jets dropping bombs strapped to parachutes, falling onto civilian areas, civilian casualties, women and children. And I wanted to ask you, have you ever even privately condemned the regime for bombarding its own people?
Not only privately, we did it publicly. We condemn all use of force which makes civilians to suffer.
And what's their response when you say that to them?
We were condemning, we do this irrespective of whether this is done by those whom we like politically or dislike politically. We were condemning what our Western friends call collateral damage in Libya when civilians were dying. We were condemning the collateral damage in Iraq. And we were condemning the use of force by the regimes when the civilians suffered, be it Libya, be it Syria, be it any other country. But you have really to be consistent, and you have to understand that the opposition is not just, you know, peaceful civilians.
But it started that way. I was there. I was at those protests.
It started the way it started. And if we now want to get into the business of who is to blame and not being able to lift a finger to stop the violence before we decide who is to blame, then I'm afraid we would be in for a very, very, very difficult and long tragedy. If we are willing to do everything to stop this and to save lives, then we have to really agree on our priorities. Justice must be done, but justice can wait until we stop this. You cannot really say we would not help stop the bloodshed until we have this guy in the court.
Do you ever worry that you've backed the wrong horse?
No, we are not cynical enough, you know, to use this type of analogy to describe a very tragic situation. We are not wedded to President Assad. People know this, and when we discuss things privately with my colleagues, including those who publicly make statements which are catching eye, you know, of the viewers and creating a very simplistic picture of what is going on. When we talk to them privately, they understand fully what is going on. But they say, you must understand that very early in the conflict we said he must go, and now we cannot eat our head. Okay, we have to choose. Either you think about your reputation because you make a wrong statement 2 years ago, or you think about achieving real result, which would save lives. And then you can use any eye catchers, you know, like backing the horse or something else. But this
wrong side of history.
Wrong side of history. Yeah, we have learned, heard all of this, and we were also told that we lost the Arab world. Well, how to put it mildly, this is wrong. This is wrong because we work probably we are the only country who works with all spectrum of the Syrians, including all groups of the opposition, including the armed opposition. And we understand that those of them who think about their country, they could be really brought together and a compromise could be reached. So that not just the opposition who says, well, negotiations are good, but the only purpose to go to Geneva is for the government to deliver the full authority and to give it to us. This is not going to work because this is not what we agreed last year in Geneva. We said that government and the opposition must decide the composition of this transitional governing organ by mutual consent. And second, because apart from this coalition, there are people who, as I said, never left Syria and who suffered and lived through all these difficulties together with their people. And they have the right, you know, to express their view of what kind of future they want for their country.
Some analysts have suggested that Russia's stance on Syria may be a knee-jerk reaction to what it perceives as U.S. meddling in other nations' affairs. Do you think that's fair?
No, I think this is again something which analysts invent to have something which would sell on TV, the newspapers and other media. We don't build our foreign policy on the basis of this kind of judgment. We try to be consistent. And as we were condemning the way NATO used the Security Council mandate in Libya, by the same token, we condemn those people whom NATO supported in Libya when these people are trying to get to power in Mali now. And our French colleagues who were supplying the Libyan rebels with arms are now fighting them in Mali encountering the French equipment, which is used against them. So you either...
You see a hypocrisy in the West.
I see double standards, if you wish. You either deny terrorists any acceptance in the international life, or you make your double standard policy work the way it has been working. I don't like this guy in this country, so we would be calling him a dictator and topple him. This guy in another country is also dictatorial, but he is our dictator, to put this a bit differently than one famous American said about bad guys who were our bad guys. We have to take a look at the comprehensive picture of what is going on in the Middle East and North Africa and down south, the Sahel region. And what is going on is radicalization of politics, extremists being harbored from Libya. Arms and combatants are infiltrating into Mali and some other countries in the region. And you either make your, picking on the basis of whom you like and whom you don't, or you agree that there is a common enemy in the person of international terrorism. And I think you must be consistent.
So do you see President Assad in that sense as an ally of Russia's?
We see an ally in all those who want the Syrian war to stop.
And do you believe President Assad wants that?
For this, you have to make sure that the opposition expresses its readiness to go to this conference, because he said his delegation is ready. And to call him bluff, you need to see whether the opposition is coming or not.
But what do you believe?
Well, I believe he would send the delegation.
And do you believe that he wants peace in Syria?
I am not in the business of believing. I am in the business of verifying. We wouldn't know whether this conference has a chance until the time the delegations sit down at the table with the outside circle pushing them into their backs and not allowing them to leave this table until they agree.
You're in a unique position, though. Russia has great influence on the Syrian regime. Do you feel the weight of that responsibility?
Yes, no doubt about it.
And when you see the regime using ballistic missiles against its own people, killing hundreds, taking out entire city blocks.
We cannot have responsibility for what the regime is doing. And as I said, we condemn any abuse of international humanitarian law. We feel responsibility and bear this responsibility as the Russian Federation, who is co-sponsoring an important international meeting together with the United States. And we delivered what we promised, namely the government consent to send the delegation to this conference. So for all other responsibilities, be it the regime, be it the opposition, be it the outside sponsors of the opposition, you have to talk to those who have influence on these groups of people.
I just wanted to talk to you quickly about the Boston bombings. Do you see this as an opportunity for the US and Russia to cooperate further on counterterrorism efforts?
Well, I think we have always been in favor of this cooperation to be deepened. We have a saying, we might not have luck, but bad luck helped. Не было бы счастья, да несчастье помогло. I think when President Putin, just like immediately after 9/11 tragedy, called his American counterpart and expressed his condolences and readiness to help, I believe the two presidents had a very good conversation and agreed, well actually, in the context of what we just discussed about what is going on in the Middle East and North Africa, they agreed that there should be no double standards in fighting terrorism. And normally people don't draw lessons from past history, but I think 9/11 is still very fresh in the minds of the Americans and all others, to forget the fact that when the US back last century in the 1980s, 1970s and 1980s was supporting Mujahideens in Afghanistan against the Soviet troops, and then these Mujahideens gave rise to Al-Qaeda, and then Al-Qaeda struck back, we have to be consistent. And I hope that this terrorist attack in Boston would improve the cooperation and the coordination between our agencies. We immediately after the Boston terrorist attack arranged for the FBI to visit Makhachkala to talk to the family of the Tsarnaev's brothers. Director of FBI, Mr. Mueller, visited last month and had useful discussions with his colleagues. And other special services and intelligence communities cooperate very closely on this particular case, but also trying to establish priorities for future cooperation in other cases.
Some people have suggested the Boston bombers are an American issue, that they have no relation to Russia's own difficulties in the Caucasus. Do you see it as a purely American incident? Or?
Well, some 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the Americans called those who were trying to establish a Sharia law in the Chechen Republic, the US called them, just like they did Mujahideens in Afghanistan, freedom fighters. Quite a number of them were given political asylum in the United States, including a gentleman called Ilyas Maskhadov, a very close associate of Basayev. Basayev was recognized as a terrorist by the US and by the United Nations, but Maskhadov still lives there, and Ilyas Akhmadov, I'm sorry I misspoke, and he enjoys the status of political refugee. By the way, he was given political asylum by a Boston court decision, and he writes books and receives subsidies from National Endowment for Democracy, in spite of the fact that all necessary material on this particular person is available with the United States respective agencies. So I think that this would be changing, and the less we attempted to use terrorist situations, I would say, to achieve one or another geopolitical goal, different from fighting terrorism wherever it pops up, I think we would be doing the wrong thing.
Mr. Lavrov, thank you so much for your time. I know that we've used our 30 minutes. We're just going to get a two-shot, if that's okay. Do you think that, well, just while we're on the two-shot, you know, it's a wider shot, so it doesn't matter as much, but do you think that more could have been done on both sides, on the US and the Russian side, to pin down these men before the attacks happened?
Well, this was discussed broadly in the US media, and that was it was not us who raised this issue in the public domain. So, but there were contacts a couple of years ago, and there were some warnings. But I don't want to get into the substance of this. I am not a professional on counterterrorism in practical terms, but the legal basis for counterterrorism, the politics which we promote on the basis of this legal understandings and legal norms are very important.
But you're looking very closely to see what lessons have been learned, and I'm assuming it's sort of refocused Russian security forces on looking at Dagestan and Ingushetia and the Caucasus.
Well, the terrorist manifestations still take place, but in much less numbers than it used to be. And I can assure you that we have understanding with intelligence and special agencies of other countries, including the US, to make certain that this would not be treated in isolation, because it's all related. From Afghanistan and Pakistan, some no-man land, Waziristan, between these two countries, then Central Asia, the Caucasus, it's all parts of what we call terrorist international. And as the sooner we stop calling terrorists good and bad and call them just terrorists, the better is for the world.
Спасибо вам.